really enjoy Saturday mornings. How's that for a segue to a message? We really enjoy Saturday mornings because both of us are kind of busy through the week. And for about 2 hours on Saturday, we can do like the old country western song that says, "Make the world go away." Anybody like those moments?
Yes. Amen.
And we will sit at a little place downtown and have coffee together. And we read the newspaper, or at least we attempt to, and talk about all the things that seem to come to mind, some important, some not. But it's just a wonderful, wonderful time for us to sit together. And yesterday was no exception. There had been a lot of news recently about an unfolding story in the sports world regarding a doping scandal. You remember reading about that this week? Players that were found to have been using what they call PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs. You can probably remember a few years ago where there were some very, very well-known and prominent players who were caught to have been using those, and some of them had been very successful in the home run part of baseball as batters. When all of that information became public, of course they were really held in poor esteem by people because they had been so adamant that they had never done anything that would have artificially assisted them. And I'm not trying to take that issue on. That's certainly not my message for this morning. But a new and undetectable substance has been detected. So I guess it wasn't undetectable, was it? And now a new round of accusations and suspensions are taking place. And that has been kind of the news this week. And there was one particular individual who had received a very prestigious award last year as a baseball player. And at the same time he was receiving the award last year, first information came out about his involvement with this controlled substance that was a performance-enhancing drug. And I remember watching him on the sports channel, ESPN, and I could see how adamant he was in saying, "I did not do this. I don't lie. If I do something wrong, I accept responsibility for it and come clean publicly." And he was just adamant that he hadn't done this. He was indignant. The fact there was a technical glitch in the drug sample that he gave didn't really come into play, and that's kind of how he skated on it. He stood with friends and he swore his innocence to them. As a matter of fact, one friend was so convinced that he was telling the truth. As a football player, he bet his whole year's salary that this guy was telling the truth. Or he said he would wager that. That's how sure he was that this young man was telling the truth. And this week, that young man accepted a 65-game suspension and is no longer playing the rest of the season because he was found to have been using inappropriate aids to make him a better player. And he said, "Well, why in the world, Pastor, would you bring that up?" Because in an article on the sports page this week, on Saturday, while I was sitting with my wife and having coffee, the last line in the article refers back to this story about the inappropriate drug use by the baseball player. And this was the final line to the article. "So folks, trust no one." And I read that and I thought, wow, what a leap for a person to make. That we come to such a jaded and cynical position on life that we trust no one. Let me ask you a question. How many of you this morning have had somebody tell you things were a certain way and you found them to be different? Okay? How many of you were willing to give up trusting anyone at that point? That's a huge leap. Now, I can see a certain set of circumstances where a person might begin to feel that way. Anyone who's ever been betrayed knows how that feels. But here's where I want to go with this morning. God promises that into that experience, into the experience of a world, because the title of my message this morning is Maintaining Trust in a World of Compromise. How do we maintain trust in a world of compromise? Because it would be very easy to come to the conclusion that this sports writer did that says, there's not anybody I'm going to put my trust in. As a matter of fact, I looked at an article on the internet done by a polling service about the different groups of people that were trusted. It was really funny. Politicians, I think there were like 3% of the folks said that they would trust what politicians have to say. Interestingly enough, people said that they would trust their spouses at 85% plus. And that people put a lot of trust into their mate, both male and female. And there were a variety of other different professions that people chose to trust or not to trust. Most of them, the highest of all, as a matter of fact, ministers, I think, were listed at like 35%. What a sad thing.
Yeah.
What a sad thing. And so it's easy to see where a person could come to a cynical viewpoint. And yet, God comes to us and He says, no, there is a place. There is a place that you can trust, because it's very easy for us to make the leap from don't trust anyone to don't trust anyone, and that includes God as well. And God has presented Himself to us as one who is eminently trustworthy. One in whom we can put our complete trust. Now, the problem with that is sometimes God chooses to act in a way that you and I disagree with. Anybody ever been there? Anybody live at that address? I think we all do to some degree. But to give us a picture of what God has in mind in this idea of trust, I've looked at some verses in the Scriptures, and I've taken the word trust, and I've created an acronym for us this morning to help us look at this issue of trusting God and also trusting others as well. But especially in our trust of God. So T-R-U-S-T. What does trust look like? The first thing that I want you to see with me is this, that trust involves trouble. Trust involves trouble. There's not anybody who has any problem trusting someone who has never failed you, right? Or trusting someone when everything is going like you would like for it to go. The only time I trust my car implicitly till it makes a funny noise, right? And then I begin to think, oh, is this car going to break down on me? And we do the same thing as long as everything is going well. As long as things are moving along as we, with all of our daily needs being met, and I have plenty of cash to live, and my health is strong, and my relationships are intact, I'm fully self-contained, and everything is okay, and I can trust wonderfully. But what happens when trouble hits? See, it's then that we find our values. And it's then that our values become tested. When trouble hits, we find out what we really believe in and what we hold to. Psalm 37 is one of my favorite psalms, and it begins with a problem. The success of those who are successful by unscrupulous ways, just like the baseball player we were talking about today. It says, don't worry when people succeed by unscrupulous means. Now, everyone has had someone that you've worked with be successful by violating company policy, right? Somebody has done something that has helped them become successful because they've cut corners in company policy in some kind of way. Am I right or wrong? Okay? We run into that. We have classmates who cheat to pass exams or who buy term papers online. Or the frustration that we feel because it seems like everyone cheats and you've decided that you're not going to do that, but that you're going to live by your integrity. We all know that these things happen, and we've all been tempted. Anybody ever been tempted to get down and dirty and just play the game the way they play it? So what do we trust? When the trouble comes, where is our trust? And to what do we hold ourselves to when the difficulty in life comes? In response to this situation, I love what David says. He says, don't worry when people succeed in their evil schemes. And then he says this, trust God and continue to do good. Wait a minute, let me see if I can replay this here. People are succeeding with their evil schemes, and what you're telling me to do is to trust God and keep playing by the rules. Pretty much it. Is there anybody else that can offer advice? Trust God and do good. When trouble comes, but see, the question is, in what do you and I trust? Look with me at Psalm 37, because I want to read you the entirety of the thought that he communicates here. Psalm 37, verses 3 through 6. David writes, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. To trust is always going to be borne out in a period of trouble, in a period of testing. And it's then that you and I decide, where will we put our trust? Will I trust what God has said to be true, or will I put my trust in what I think will work in that situation? Trust begins with trouble. Trust will always involve trouble at some point. As a matter of fact, I thought of Tom and Mary Ford this morning. They've been married 2 weeks, and of the 2 weeks they've been married, he spent both weekends in the hospital. When we get married, we all say for better or for worse. We just didn't know how much worse it was going to get. And the same thing is true when we put our trust in God. God says he will meet us. God says he will work in our lives. But folks, the trust that you and I face, or that we decide to live out, is always going to be faced with trouble. The second word that I want you to see with me, trust, is spelled trouble, but it's also spelled rest. When we trust someone or a particular situation, we are able to be at ease around that person. We've all had a situation where perhaps a new relationship or person that we're getting to know, and we felt uncomfortable or ill at ease because we don't have the necessary level of trust. We don't know what they're really like yet, and so it's hard for us to really put our confidence in them, and we're uncertain. either a person or even in a particular situation, maybe an ability to do a job that you've been asked to do. As I was thinking about this yesterday and writing out what I'd share with you this morning, it made me recall when Sherry and I were first dating. And she would be so nervous. I'm just such an ogre. She would be so nervous that she couldn't eat. It's great. I'd take her out on a date. She wouldn't eat anything. But it was true of all the ladies in her family. They just had this characteristic that when they were dating a guy, that they would get nervous and they couldn't eat. And it's the same kind of thing. There's this. She didn't know me well enough to feel comfortable and trust me in every situation. And there was just this tension that was expressed by her inability. She lost her appetite. I have never had that problem. Trust always brings rest, because we know we can rely on what we're trusting. It always brings us to a place of rest. Listen to what Jesus said, his classic passage on trust. And although the word trust isn't mentioned in it, it's certainly expressed in the words that Jesus said, to come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And you, catch this, you will find rest for your souls. When we put our trust in who God is, it brings us into a place of rest. It's a remarkable thing when we look at some of the historical figures from the Scriptures and we see what they have gone through and how they have handled what they have handled. And to not see them frantic in the trouble that they face, but to see the confidence that they have in God. David speaks of this rest that comes from trust in Psalm 91. And I won't take the time, in the interest of time, I won't take the time to read them, to read the entirety of it. But this is the essence of what he says. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. They say of the Lord, He is my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Trust brings us to a place of rest and being able to settle ourselves. Sherry and I were talking yesterday, and I wanted to be sure that I told this story correctly. We came across a journal that Courtney had written. It was the last journal. For those of you who may not know, Courtney was our daughter who passed away about 10 years ago with cancer. And godly young lady. And the last journal entry that she made, which was in July, and she passed away in October. She had said, Lord, I have been praying and wanting you to heal me, and that's really all that I've been about. But now, God, I see that what I really need to do is just put my life in your hands. And whatever your will is, God, that is what I will accept. Trust brings us to a place of rest.
Yes.
And if you knew anything about Courtney during that stage in her life, she was an absolutely amazing young lady in her confidence, in her faith, and her rest in God. Trust brings us to a place of rest. The third thing, and I wish that I had internet access so that I could show you a visual image. of what I want to portray to you verbally. Because the U in trust stands for unflinching. Earlier this year, I did a sermon where I referenced a part of the United States Army, and I've since found out that each branch of the service has a group that's called the Silent Drill Team. Have any of you heard about them? Just Google it and look at the videos that will pop up. It is the most remarkable thing. Each group is about Silent Drill Team. There's about 20 to 24 in the drill team. They march in perfect synchronization. They have 7.5-pound carbine rifles with bayonets fixed to them, real bayonets fixed to them. And they do all of their maneuvers without any verbal command. One of the amazing things that they do is as they're marching at close to the end of their presentation, they have this one move where the guy that's at the head of a row will take his weapon and he will throw it over his head all the way to the guy at the end of the line, who catches it in midair, and they just continue to march in formation. There's another move, and here's where this trust, the unflinching trust, comes in. Their drill sergeant is very, as you can imagine, very prim and proper and spit and polish. And he comes to a point in their presentation where he's standing in the middle of the group, and all of the other members of the drill team have their backs to him. And again, I don't know how they do this. They've learned each other's rhythm, but they spin 180 degrees, and each one of them brings his carbine with its fixed bayonet up to within about this far of the face of the commander. Now, you'd have to pick me up in pieces. And this gentleman stands unflinching. He trusts his team members. Do you remember 3 Hebrew young men who were told, you either bow to this image or we will throw you in a furnace that will consume you? And they said, God, our God, is able to deliver us.
Amen.
But even if He doesn't, we're not bowing. That is unflinching.
Yes.
Or another guy that was in the same group, a guy by the name of Daniel, who was told, you can't pray anymore, Daniel, because it's against the law. You can't pray to your God, you can only pray to Nebuchadnezzar. And I love what it says. It says that Daniel just went to his place of prayer and opened the windows of his room so that everybody could see him, and he continued to pray. Unflinching. Unflinching trust. It's amazing to me, even though he prayed, Father, not my will, but yours be done. Jesus went to the cross unflinchingly so that he might be a sacrifice for our sins. Trust. Trust is unflinching. The fourth word, the letter S, stands for strength. To trust means to draw strength from, or to draw from someone. We trust a variety of things in life, from people to equipment to institutions to doctors to whomever. And because we trust them, we benefit or we draw strength from what they do or can do for us. In biblical times, the strength of kings and kingdoms were measured in a number of ways. Economically, territorially, educationally, but also militarily. With the military the size of the army, and the number of chariots and horses were part of the calculation. It's why in Psalm 20, verse 7, David says this: some will trust in chariots, some will trust in horses, but we will trust in the name of the Lord our God.
Amen.
Because you see, the more horses you had and the more chariots you had, the more ability that you had to defeat your enemies. And so that idea of some men trust in chariots, some men trust in horses, is really an expression of strength. This was my ability to overcome my enemy. And if I had more chariots and more horses, I could run faster, I could go, and I could take more people with me than just foot soldiers. And David said, as a king, David said, some will trust in that, but we will trust in the name of the Lord our God, because He will be the strength by which we live. How He becomes our strength when we put our trust in Him. That's how that takes place. He becomes our strength when we put our trust in Him, which brings us to our last letter, another T. And that T stands for tested. Tested. Not that we are tested, but that we have tested Him. And that we have found Him to be exactly who He said He was. And our trust, then, is built on the confidence that we have that God, who said, I will never leave you or forsake you, really won't.
Amen.
The God who said that He would be your provision and supply in difficult times really will.
Yes.
We have trusted Him. Trust is something we realize by having put our trust in someone else. Don't we do that within our own business situations? We go to a particular doctor because somebody else said, hey, you know what, that's really a good doctor. Or we go to this dentist because that's a good dentist. Or we go to that attorney because that attorney does a good job. Or we go to a particular college because that college has a good reputation for producing good students. We look at what others have told us or what we have found through research, that this is a reliable and a reputable business institution, whatever the particular case may be. And we put our trust in it because it's tested. It's stood the test of time. Folks who have walked with God and learned what we've talked about today do so because they have tested God. And this is where it brings us back actually to the beginning again. Because too often, when the trouble comes, we don't stay and allow God to be tested in that situation. But we look for an exit out of that situation, and we never discover that God is going to help us through it. Heard a man say this years ago. He had walked through, he had been at the pinnacle of his career, and because of some very poor choices he made, not only did he lose his position, but he, because of breaking some laws, he spent a number of years in jail because of bad decisions that he's made, and literally lost everything. Not just in a material sense, but his reputation, his professional status. He literally lost everything. And he said, I used to tell people that Jesus is all you need. And he said, because I've walked through this experience in my life, he said, I've found that until Jesus is all you have, you will never know that He is all that you need. And that's where the trust factor comes in. Until you and I walk out and stand at the place where our trust is fully placed upon Him,
Yes.
then we will never really know that He can be what you and I need. We've jokingly talked about this before, and we'll do the exercise just for the fun of doing it, because I think some of you this morning haven't. How many of you would like to have God do a miracle in your life?
Amen.
Wouldn't you love that? Wouldn't that just be awesome?
Yes.
Okay? How many of you would like to be in a place where only a miracle will save you? Not too many hands. But it's in that place that we discover who God is. It's in that place that God begins to show us. He begins to show us who He is. And folks, that's when God becomes precious to us. It's like a husband and wife or friends that have walked through difficulty. And you realize, this person is for me. This person didn't run away when the going got rough. But this person stayed with me. And it's only in those places that we can learn. Do we live in a world where trust is compromised? Absolutely. And it's tragic. And it's why the millennial generation has such a hard time trusting. And there is a responsibility that the preceding generations carry for that. But no one is ever exempt from coming to the place of saying, but you know what, I've got to stand on my own 2 feet. And I've got to be responsible for my own decisions. And God, I'm going to choose to take you at your word. I'm going to trust you. And I'm going to let you do in my life what only you can do.
Yes.
And that's when things begin to take a turn. Would you bow your heads with me?